Thanks, Shayla. Thanks, Misty. All right. Well, hey, how you guys doing? Doing all right out there? Yeah? Okay. If you're new around these parts, thanks for being here. This is Beach's Vineyard. We've been meeting in this cool old theater building for quite a while, since '07. We moved in. By way of introduction, there's a film and family room across the hall right here. So if you've got young ones in here, they're always welcome to come and join and hang out. But if anybody gets squirmy, and it would be nice to have some space to roam. Everything that happens in here is streamed over there, so you won't miss too much. Try to keep these things interactive, all right, which is slightly unusual for the format, I understand. Churches have kind of adopted the collegiate format, where you kind of got the lecture guy up here who's figured out what the problems are and then also how to solve them, and then you come in and listen and then try to, make sense of what you hear and figure out how to quietly apply it to your life, which is fine. A while ago, I wondered if it would be possible to shake that format up a little bit and engage in some group discussion. I also had some legitimate concerns that it might get crazy if we tried that, and it hasn't. It's been one of my favorite parts of this whole experiment that we've been conducting here for a couple years. So your voice is welcome. We think through these things together. The best moments I've ever had up here are the times when I can tell that we're all processing together, that there's something that's being communicated to all of us simultaneously, and I can feel us working it out. I can feel our collective energy moving through whatever the questions are, and it's just amazing when that happens. So use your voice, and yeah. All right, so let's see if I still remember how to do this. Somehow we just went a whole month without me teaching. I took the month off on accident. We had a work day. There's no teaching. We had an all-ages gathering. There's no teaching. We ordained Corey. You may remember this. So there was no teaching there. And here we are. Find out if it's like riding a bike or not. I went to this has nothing to do with anything, except it came to mind during the silence because I'm a holy man, so my silence is sacred, and these are the thoughts that I find myself thinking. I went to the doctor for like a little physical exam checkup thing this week, and he came walking into the room, and I must have been looking particularly relaxed or something, because he went, "Ha!" when he walked in, and I was like, "Hey." And he goes, "What? Are you a pastor or some like beach dude just coming off the shore or something like this?" And I was like, "Wow, why are those terms mutually exclusive?" And later on, he goes, he commented again on my appearance, and he said, "So what does your son do to rebel? Does he like wear a suit and tie? Does he dress up?" I was like, "Yeah, man, he's gone corporate. He's driving me crazy." I don't know how he got like that. Well, maybe it does tie in a little bit. This persona and ego, our ideas of who it is that we think that we are. That might be ego. Persona might be what it is that I'm willing to present to give you an idea of who it is I hope that you think that I am. Yeah, we've been talking about these themes for a little while now. We're going to continue this morning in this EIKON series. This is kind of part 2 of the last teaching. It was on ego, and this one's called The Invisible Death, part 6. So I'm just going to read 3 scriptures in succession, in unhurried succession, and we'll pause and make space for reflection after. This is St. Paul, 2 Corinthians 4. He wrote that the same God who said, "Let light shine out of darkness," made that same light shine in our hearts, illuminating the knowledge of God's glory in the countenance of Christ. A storehouse of light in jars of clay, fragile vessels containing the transcendent presence of God. Now, knowing what's within us, we calmly endure, constricted but never crushed, wayless, lost, without worry, persecuted and somehow protected, cast aside, abandoned, forgotten, and very much alive. Here's an old one, Ecclesiastes 12. Remember God. Remember. Before the silver cord is severed or the golden bowl is broken, before the dust returns to the ground that it came from, and the spirit returns to God who gave it. Remember. And here's Jesus in Mark 8. He said, "Follow me and be like me. Become so lost in God that you forget who it is that you think that you are. If you hold too tightly to any construct, even your best ideas of God and yourself, you'll watch them join time's persistent march to the grave. So let them go today and discover what's real and everlasting. Ask yourself, is full immersion in this material world's temporary pleasures really rewarding? Is it worth wagering that which is eternal and unchanging within you? You must let go." So how do you respond to these scriptures? What do you notice? Anybody? Any feelings invoked? Okay, that's fine. That works actually. So, yeah, I won't project this onto you. I have absolutely no idea what you're thinking or feeling because you didn't say anything. You're just making me guess up here, which rarely goes well. Well, in my marriage, but we're not married, so let's give it a shot. So the ego, the mind. For me, when I hear words like these, there's something in, and it feels like it's in here. I don't know where it really is, but it feels like it's in here. And when I hear words like these, it feels like a knot coming untied, or there's just like room to breathe somewhere around my lungs, I guess, or my heart. And simultaneous to that feeling, generally, if I check in on what's going on in my head, is I find a whole list of objections to this teaching, or questions like, let go of what? What do you mean let go? How do you let go? Let go of what if I let go? Let go of everything? You want me to be homeless, living on the streets? You're like, somebody's got to put their hand to this stuff. Or let go of what? If I let go of that, I might go crazy. If I let go of that, I might not make it. If the head, just the mind, the ego. There's this part of us that thinks in very concrete, linear terms, and it seems to be some kind of survival machine. It's like an anti-death machine that's in here, and it's been established over millennia of adaptive responses to environmental changes, evolution. It's evolved to help keep what we experience to be a separate self, me, like a viable option. And it has funny influence on us. Like, you ever do this? You ever notice that you're negotiating pretty hard with yourself in your mind? Like there's this guy who's always out in front of the grocery store that I go to, and he's always looking for. He's always asking if I'll, get him some chicken when I go in there, if I have a couple bucks for him. And my general policy is, if somebody asks me for, this is dangerous to tell a crowd. Whatever. If somebody asks me for a couple bucks and I have a couple bucks, I usually just give it away. That's kind of my. And So I was doing that, and then after a while I thought, well, shoot, I go to the grocery store like at least 3 times a day. I don't know why. That's what happens. Poor planning. So, like, I'm not going to keep up. I'm going to have to, this is going to have to be a budget line item if I'm going to set this precedent. And then I'm like, well, what would Jesus do? And and all of a sudden I'm tuned into my head, and I realize I'm negotiating with myself. There's a part of me that's like, this is not a wise move. Got to keep this thing a viable option. You can't be giving all your money to this guy. And another part of me that knows that it's going to be okay, and that I'd rather risk generosity than hanging on so tightly. So the mind, the ego, this part of us that's concerned with keeping us alive, also spends a great deal of its energy trying to help us ignore the fact that it's not going to get out of here alive. And it kind of lives with this understanding, intuition that there's only one way in, there's only one way out. That the ultimate statistic, you ever heard that? Just 1 in 1 die. Which is math I can get behind. That makes sense to me. It's clean. Except for Elijah. The ego has a way, the mind, of becoming so busy and so noisy and so sort of distraction-fueled that when we begin to sort of tune into it, to experience a little bit of separation to where we can kind of spy on our thoughts a little bit, it can be kind of exhausting and overwhelming. And I remember years ago, somebody asked me what things were like in my head, and I told them it's like a backyard filled with cats. That was the first thing that came to mind. And the last 100 years have seen this influx of influence from sort of Eastern religious traditions, and this is only 100 years old that we've even had exposure to each other on this scale. The airplane, the internet, the world has dramatically shrunk, and there's no way that any of us have any idea the difficulty that we're having as individuals and a culture at assimilating all of this information that we have access to. They're going to have sympathy for us in the history books if history continues past the next. And I think maybe one vast oversimplification, but term that I'm sure we're all familiar with, that's kind of as a result of this influx, this idea to kill your ego. You got to put this thing to death. There's a line in one of my favorite songwriter, Sturgill Simpson. He's got a line that says, I woke up this morning, I decided to kill my ego. It ain't never done me no good, no how. And I remember thinking, how do you do that? If you listen to the last teaching, it could be called sympathy for the ego. And I won't give us the Cliff Notes now, but just encourage you to tune into that if you would like some more information on what we're talking about. I kind of want to talk about this idea, kill your ego, for just a minute. The scriptures, for their part, also, especially the New Testament, also contain many lines and ideas that seem to be communicating the same thing. Here's a couple. This is St. Paul. He said, I've been crucified with Christ. And now when I look inside myself, I don't see anybody named Paul in here anymore. And yet I'm still living. So he concludes that, well, this must be Christ living his life in me. In Colossians 3, he says, in Christ, all former distinctions, political affiliation, national identity, religious allegiance, gender role, family systems, economic borders, all former distinctions just dissolve. And we see that Christ is all and is in all. What do you hear there? How do you respond to this so far? Say again?
It's
It's freeing. Yeah, what's it freeing from? From everything. That's true. Hmm. Yeah, it does. Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, to let go more of your kind of idea of yourself, and yeah, groups you're associated with. Yeah. I used to ask people, what party do you think you'll vote for in the afterlife? I mean, 110 years old. Secret to longevity, I quit worrying. Did you ask her how she did that? Yeah. She learned. Lost my. Hmm. You say something?
No, I was just going to say, I think it's hard to give up this.
Hmm.
I mean, how many people, they feel their identity is tied to these things.
Hmm.
I mean, people who are Christians in other churches, they're tied to their church, and that's who they are, that's what they value. And it's hard, I think, to get past that sometimes and really reflect on what this means.
Yeah. Yep. Hmm. Hmm. I remember this story. I heard about Gandhi. There was some rally that they had organized that he was going to, and it took a lot of effort to put it together. And the day before the rally, he encountered some new information that made him reverse course on whatever the theme of the rally was. And so he let the people know that organized it. I'm sorry, I'm not going to be able to be there. So it's wildly inconvenient. And when he got pushed back, apparently, if you heard this, his response was, my commitment is to the truth, not consistency. Yeah. Um, People really like consistency, you know. It can make it difficult to be truthful. Yeah, and it doesn't quite work like a vending machine, Yeah, that's good. I would say that second statement there, Christ is all and is in all, I think it might function as a if this, then that. I don't think that it's possible to see that Christ is all and is in all when we are still seeing things through all these lines of distinctions, because what happens then is you get Christ is here, but he's definitely not over there. It says, yeah, yes. Out beyond ideas of right doing and wrongdoing. This might be the most difficult thing to let go of. This seems very risky. Out beyond our roles is an experience of union that puts our heart to peace and our mind to rest. And our mind, even if it longs for rest, fears its disillusion and continues to pepper us with questions like, sure, give up your role as a mother. That's a great idea for the kids. Just tell them you're on a spiritual quest. They'll be fine. All these reasons to stay in the boxes. There's this thing like your grandma sewed on one of those little sayings from your grandma. What's that stuff called? Needlepoint. The lost art of needlepoint. These like I remember this one that says, if you love something, you must let it go, and if it's real, it'll come back, and if it never was, then it never was. Or if it doesn't come back, then it never was. And I think that this experience of letting go is a lot like that. We hold on to so many things that we feel are essential and crucial and critical, and without this component of myself and the way that I think and the way that I operate, it's all going to fall apart, and we're scared to test it. And in the testing and the letting go, it is the only way to experience what it is to be held and carried through this life. To find out that our decisions and the ways we operate in this world are unimportant, but are important, but significantly less so than being free. The highest ideal for most of us, I think we'd say love, agape love, selfless love. And there's really no way to experience what that is without the surrender of the self. Somebody told me one time, they said, if there's something good, like it's good, virtuous, and you have a strong inclination to do it, it's going to be helpful. He said, resist that urge with all your heart. Like, just keep sowing that back into the soil. And if you can't keep it down, then it's probably not from you. And that's a pure action. Right, because the rest of it's virtue signaling. I hope I don't offend anybody around here, but like those signs that people put in their yards that are like, we think that everyone's awesome, and we stand for this, that, and the other, and every time I read it, I just kind of think it seems like it's going, it's kind of like the church lady. It's like the liberal culture's version of what everybody was uppity about the church being like in the 80s. It's all right, I got to get back on schedule here. There's a line in a Bon Iver song that I love, and the grammar's all wrong, but he just says, it's all just scared of dying. Gives you no context on either side of the statement, but it's just stuck, it's all just scared of dying. And it comes to me so often And it interrupts my thoughts, and I look at the thought, and I think, this is just being afraid to die. This is just a distraction to not reckon with that reality. This is just an assault on this ultimate statistic. And I think even when we come to terms with the reality, a brush with our own mortality or the mortality of somebody that we love is, for most of us, a very life-changing event. It kind of rearranges everything. It purifies our focus, I'm sure you've gone through that experience, and you are filled with such sorrow or uncertainty, fear, and it's like everything goes into tunnel vision. I remember a time in our life, and I just feel like all I wanted to do was look into the eyes of my children. I just wanted to. And I realized in that how much of my time was being spent looking this way and that and tackling problems that didn't need to be tackled and just keeping myself busy, that it's like the recognition of our mortality just sort of simplifies things down, and it makes things very clear that there's actually like a couple of things that are really worth doing, investing our time in. And so even if we make peace or come to terms with the fact that, we got a shelf life, we're going to be here for so long, there's this little trick that the ego does. It's so adaptive. What it will do is then take the desire for immortality and project it onto some cause bigger than me. Such as what? You guys, what do you think of when you hear that? What's it? Not a lot that sounds real good in this context. It's a trap. Yeah, so even when we come to terms with the reality that we're all going to die, it's just, okay, I see it, I get it. There's something in us that doesn't lose this desire for immortality, and we sort of translate it and project it onto, I would say, a lot of things like ideas about the afterlife, which I'm not saying there's no such thing as heaven. Don't turn me into Rob Bell. I'm already tired. I can't go through the ringer of that. I'm just saying we don't know. None of us know for sure what happens after here. But we can concretize rough ideas in order to bring some kind of peace that maybe some part of me goes on from here. And every religion has its own expression of that. I think in like secular culture, you get things like legacy or philanthropy, and these things like they generally, genuinely benefit the world. But like most things, if you look closely enough, you see that at its root, I think a lot of this motivation is just scared to die and death denial syndrome. So I'm going to share a little story from my childhood real quick of a time where I was confronted with a reality I was not properly prepared to navigate. Mom, I have taken creative liberty for the sake of efficiency and comic effect, if you don't mind. I'm just going to read this. I wrote this up. So as I've mentioned before, by the age of 8, I had already attained to the prestigious title of Royal Rangers, Straight Arrow of the Year, State of Illinois, Assemblies of God Church. My specialty was scripture memorization. 8 years old, got the badge still. The doors to the church were open. You better believe I was there. I was homeschooled, and it didn't have anything to do with a pandemic. I had a mullet, and I had glasses that were about 6 inches thick, and if I had planned this better, I would find my soccer team photo from my 8th year that my friend in high school put in the front of his folder and carried around and showed to everybody to embarrass me, because I don't know what was going on there. But I was at this dance party the other night, and my look then would have fit right in. Apparently, that's become a style. Yeah, so I was living in a pretty insulated and overall very happy world. And during those days, we had company that came to stay with us. We just moved to Florida, and so a lot of people were coming to visit. And one of our guests, a girl who was about my age, whose parents most certainly had some concerns about my family's lifestyle choices, swam over to me in the pool. I remember it like it was yesterday. I was hanging onto the diving board. She swam over, and this is what she said. You know, the Bible's just a book of lies made up by privileged men. And then she swam off. And things get a little foggy for me from there. I remember something like an inner alarm triggered, the caution substructure of worldview being called into question, caution. And the lizard brain took over appearances for me. Like I kind of went on autopilot. I might have licked my eye. And I just stared blankly at her while my entire insides registered nothing but panic. And what happened in the days and weeks to follow is that every time that memory would come back to me about these words that were spoken, rather than sort of trying to accommodate them or understand what she meant by them, or, God forbid, ask her a follow-up question about any of that, I defaulted to, villainizing her, basically. I thought, the audacity that she would have her own heavily conditioned ideas about this ancient text and then share them with me, the straight arrow of the year. Like, that is treachery in the highest degree. We've got to find better friends. And I wish I could say that from there, my worldview started to expand and I started to make room for a variety of opinions about things that nobody can know for sure. But I didn't, and it wasn't until my 30s that a series of theological and interpersonal and vocational catastrophes suitably exploded my preconceived notions and insulated world to a point that, that Leonard Cohen song? He says, ring the bells that still can ring, forget your perfect offering. There's a crack in everything, and that's how the light gets in. That's a good reversal of the idea of being cracked. There's that Japanese art form called kintsugi. You know this one? It's mended with gold. Pottery's intentionally broken into pieces, and rather than hiding the seams, they're mended with gold, so the reminder of where the cracks. Every one of these catastrophes was profoundly painful, and I remember in the middle of each of them coming to a point where I would envision somebody a lot more emotionally neutral than me, and I would try to bring that person's consciousness into my head so I could navigate it, because I'd think, my problems are pretty small. Why do they hurt this bad? But every one of them was painful, and after enough time has passed to sort of heal from them and reflect back on how I responded to each of them, my behavior was pretty embarrassing overall, I would say. There's a line from a guy called Thomas Keating that has been extremely helpful to me for a while. He says this: the spiritual life, or salvation, can be charted as a series of necessary humiliations to the false self. And there's a kind of humbling that we can experience in this life that really does feel exactly like dying, like death. And life seems to graciously offer us many opportunities to experience it. And when we get too honest or too old or too tired to fight it, to resist, to try to wrangle the situation under control, to stage our own comeback, to get on top of it, put a good spin on it, get a PR company working. When we're worn down enough, open enough to really listen and submit ourselves to the process, what happens is, like you said, Don, I think there's a hope, a glimmer, that maybe there's a chance that all I have to do is assent to reality as it's actually presenting, and that'll clean it up. Maybe that's the magic. But submitting to the process actually just leads us into what folks have called the dark night of the soul. This place of letting go that really does feel like the letting go of everything. This feeling that we've left some shore that we know we can't return to, but there's no land in sight. And through all these strange burrows and darkened corridors of our mind, the valley of the shadow of death. Corey has a great line in one of his songs where he says, the valley of the shadow of death is the palm of your hand. He says, why is it like this? You know, well, that's nice. Did you guys hear that? We go out to sea looking for another shore, but what we're really being asked is to learn how to sail. Yeah, Jesus, in that with Nicodemus, he's like, you're one of Israel's teachers, though. How do you not understand these things? He says, you must be born again. The people born of the Spirit are blown about by the wind. Nobody knows where the wind comes from or where it's taking you. Thomas Merton said, he said, he said, I'm scattered in all directions down the street like leaves in the wind. Is this even a life? It's sort of this description of a freedom that really does transcend our ability to choose. Like when Jesus told Peter, you're a young man now, you're choosing where you're going, but when you're old, somebody else is going to lead you, and they'll probably take you places you don't want to go. And it's all for our freedom. Because the things that maybe kept us safe for a while end up becoming their own little prisons. And like the lobsters at the bottom of the sea. You know, lobsters' bodies grow. They're indeterminate growers, so they just keep getting bigger and bigger, but they sort of build their own shells. And so what happens is a process called ecdysis, where a lobster actually has to crack out of its old shell and then hide its little squishy spider body under a rock so as not to get eaten by a predator while it makes a new shell that it can live in. And if it doesn't undergo that process, then it will be suffocated in its own armor. There's a great line in if you're looking for a book recommendation, there's this book called The Solace of Fierce Landscapes that is a really well written and interesting look at desert and mountain spirituality. People who sort of subject themselves to the elements that we built stuff like this to protect us from. And I'm going to read a couple quotes from this book, and we'll close there. Maybe the premise or the core of this book is this line, this idea that we're saved. What saves us in the end are the things that ignore us. We're saved by the things that ignore us. He writes, the spiritual function of fierce terrain in the apophatic, which is the letting go, this tradition of emptiness within the Christian tradition. The spiritual function of fierce terrain is to bring us to the end of ourselves, to the abandonment of language, to the relinquishment of ego. A vast expanse of jagged stone, desert sand, and towering thunderheads has a way of challenging all the mental constructs that we're tempted to take comfort and pride in, thinking that we've somehow captured the divine. It's the things that ignore us that save us in the end. Now, first time I read that, I thought that was a bizarre little turn of phrase, and so I wonder how you respond to it, hearing it for maybe the first time. Thinking we've captured the divine, which none of us ever actually think we've done. I mean, have you ever been to church where they didn't say, don't put God in a box, but then the whole time you're like, you're putting God in a box, and so am I. It's like we knew it.
We feel pretty safe in our houses and our cars and our jobs, but we went kayaking recently and got caught in a summer storm, and it was thundering and lightning and raining like crazy, and it was amazing to suddenly feel like a scared kid again. There's nowhere to get out of going down the river, so you were just along for the ride and suddenly felt very vulnerable.
It does. Yeah, just the process of really having my tuchus, as I like to call it, handed to me these last couple of years, in some ways, has taught me more about myself in a brief amount of time than I, ever would have hoped to learn. And I noticed that so many ideals that I carried around that are objectively good ideals, that there were all kinds of things hidden behind them. And I'm going to read just a couple of them, and then I'll leave you with that, and we can have some tunes and time for reflection. I started to notice that if I look closely enough, ideas like we were created for community. We're incomplete by design. It's true. And I looked closer at it, and I saw that behind that was this idea, somebody else is going to save me. And I'm going to have to edit these parts of who I am in order to not ruffle any feathers, because the only place I'm safe is here, and I need to be accepted. We all need foundational truths to stand on. It's true. I saw that there are questions you aren't allowed to ask if you want to continue to belong. So there's this fear of confusion. Behind this is true love, God brought us together, was this person's never going to hurt me. This fear of rejection. And a whole lot of codependency there too. There's always a thing behind the thing, behind the thing, behind the thing. And we're never going to solve it or fix it or get ourselves to the point of perfection. But in noticing what it is that's actually driving us, we can't let go of what we don't know we're holding. And so the ongoing recognition, which is what repentance is, it's to go beyond the mind. It's to move outside of the preconceived notions and to look with fresh eyes at what it is that's motivating how it is that we're living. And this isn't to start a personal private salvation campaign to fix ourselves and finally be perfect. But just to see and acknowledge what it is that's actually happening within us. And this is how the letting go happens, and that part takes care of itself. Somebody said that there's nothing that can withstand the loving gaze of God. And so we'll spend the rest of our time here together. We still have 10 minutes. And you can use this time however you'd like. You guys are going to play some tunes for us, and you're welcome to sing along. You're welcome to reflect in any way. I would ask that you use this time well, and also however it is that you think would best serve you. You can talk and pray with each other. If you come over here to this section, if you'd like somebody to pray for you, you guys can keep an eye on that for me if anybody's over there looking in need of prayer. The communion elements will be open and available. And you are now free to move about the cabin. Thanks for being here. I'll let us know when it's 11:30.